Chris Woodward. President Trump is still pushing for a border wall amid talks with high-ranking Democrats in the House and Senate.
If you really want to find out how effective a wall is, just ask Israel. 99.9% effective. Then our wall will be every bit as good as that, if not better. So we've done a lot of work on the wall. A lot of wall is built. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of wall is renovated. We have walls that were in very bad condition that are now in A1 tip-top shape. Frankly, some wall has been reinforced by our military. Our military has done a fantastic job. So the wall will get built, but we may not have an agreement today. We probably won't. But we have an agreement on other things that are really good.
Despite having Republican majorities right now in the House and Senate, President Trump still needs approval from at least some Democrats. Former FBI Director James Comey called on Americans this week to use every breath they have to oust President Trump in 2020. Speaking about this on Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk, former CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson said it's not unlike things we've seen and heard from former Obama administration officials.
Well, it's not unlike Samantha Power, who tweeted something pretty shocking this week about what the press shouldn't be allowed to do, carry a headline with Trump's quotes in it, unless they call him a serial liar in the headline. It's kind of like what John Brennan and James Clapper, our former Intel top officials, have proven when they tweet out and speak publicly now, working for news organizations. The question I have is, did Donald Trump radicalize these people, or were they always this way and we just didn't know it? And I think it's the latter, and it's been pretty revealing to hear from people who normally when they leave office are pretty quiet about a lot of these sorts of things, come out and be so politically opinionated against the sitting president of the United States. It's something to hear.
Atkinson is now an investigative journalist for Full Measure News. The head of Google is on Capitol Hill trying to reassure members of the House Judiciary Committee about privacy and filtering issues. We get more on that from Fox's Rachel Sutherland.
CEO Sundar Pichai addressing allegations that employees talked about changing Google's algorithm for political purposes.
It's not possible for an individual employee or groups of employees to manipulate our search results.
Republican Steve Chabot wasn't buying that.
Somebody out there is doing something that just isn't working if you're looking for unbiased results.
Lawmakers also asking about Google's data collection practices. Pichai said the company wants to make it easier for users to be able to control their data. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
People are watching and waiting to see what happens in the stock market today. That's because of yesterday's wild 500-point swing upward for the Dow, which ended with a gain of 34 points. Meanwhile, Dan Celia of Financial Issues says people are going to need patience.
40% of the market is now what is stock pickers, individuals, kind of like where it used to be a long time ago. So the rest of it is electronic trading, and that's where we are. And that's why we see, and we will always see, I guess from this moment on, we are going to continue to see wild swings in the market like we have. We're going to need a little bit more perseverance, patience, and stick-to-itiveness to our strategy than we've ever needed before.
The NASDAQ and S&P also finished in positive territory Monday. In final news this hour, those deadly wildfires in Northern California destroyed property and lives, but they were unable to destroy the bond between a pet and family. A cat in the town of Paradise was reunited with its family after it stayed behind after the fires broke out. Courtney Warblow and her family returned to her parents' home over the weekend and found their beloved cat, Timber, standing near the ruins. Warblow made a video of the emotional reunion after spotting the beige cat looking at them from a distance. Warblow says the reunion is a much-needed moment of hope for her family, who lost everything else in the fire. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time-tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We just brought a new White House counsel today who just started, who's going to be fabulous. The president announced his pick for Attorney General, who will be quite good as well. And right now in the White House, we have a lot of good people who are just working along, and the president will make the right choice for Chief of Staff when he's ready.
If you hire an attorney, you're hiring an attorney to make sure it's done legally in the process. So, and if you're going to try to impeach a president over a campaign finance problem, campaign finance problems are usually fines, which a number of members have. I wonder how they felt about whether they should stay in their job.
If the document that the judge was given was paid for by a political party and the opposing candidate, and it was never verified, and it's not verified to this day, what happens to those who submit the document to the court? If they're not punished, you're going to reinforce doing this in the future.
When politics weren't involved and national security and border security were on their minds, they did the right thing, and we hope they'll do the right thing here. The Democrats have a central question in front of them, Bill. Do they want to keep the government open, or do they want to keep the borders open?
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. We are going to have a jam-packed show today. We have Catherine Davis. She's the founder and president of the Restoration Project. She's coming on today, and she'll be joining us to discuss her work on the Restoration Project and what that means to Americans and people that are affected by mental illness and dealing with that kind of situation. And we're also going to talk about this big fight between the president and Pelosi and Schumer about the wall. The president actually has a way of funding the wall and so many other things through the military. So there is money there. There's $1.6 billion there. And the Democrats aren't budging. That was what the big fight was about. And that is going to be a part of what the president has to maneuver around during the lame duck and going forward making plans for what he sees as happening in the next 2 years of his presidency. The president has a job to do. He has made a commitment about the wall and about the funding of the wall, and he's made a commitment to get it finished. Now, a lot of work has already been done. We've covered that here on the program, and we've talked a lot about how the president, through using the military, especially those troops that are deployed now, and some of the funding that he's been able to get some of that wall done. But this is not one long continuous wall. It's a combination of wall, fencing, et cetera. So we're going to talk about the Democrats refusing to fund that, and so on. And then we're going to get into your calls, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. And also the founder or CEO, Google's CEO, not the founder, but CEO, Sundar Pichai. He claims he's leading the company without any bias. Now, I know for some of us that sounds believable, possibly, but I'm not so sure, because there is a study out. We've actually had two guests on the program talking about their documentary, The Creepy Line, where they've kind of shown definitively that Google has been able to sway about 2.6 million votes to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. And this was not, this isn't biased, because one of the people, the one we had on just recently, Dr. Epstein, he's actually a Clinton voter. He believes in liberalism, and he's a part of that movement. But through his work on the Creepy Line documentary and the research that they did, they've been able to find out that this is a danger to the representative republic that we have here in America, because we're talking about taking the will of the voters and subverting it and having a very small number of people in charge of that. So we don't want that. We don't have time for it. We don't have space for it. We don't have room for it. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue to look at it, and we'll talk a little bit about what the testimony meant. When you think about a CEO of a company coming before Congress to talk about data collection and so many other things that Google does, the way that they use their developers and other companies, they all work together to collect data on Americans. One statistic that I saw recently is 1,400 times in one day, one single person was tracked using their cell phone and all of their searching history on web surfing and on everything they're doing online connected with their phone, using that to pinpoint this person's location 1,400 times in one day. That should be something that we're all concerned about. So we'll get into that. Right now, I want to talk about the Daily Confession. And what we have going on today for Daily Confession is that we are heirs and not slaves with Christ. So it takes us back to the story of Abraham and Sarah in the Bible. And so Abraham and Sarah were old and on in the years, and they had the promise from God. God actually promised them that they would birth a nation between the two of them. But when God made that promise to them, they actually were pretty on in the years. And then instead of, as we humans like, when we pray for something, God gives it to us immediately. That's what we're looking for. Instead of that, we had the time progressing and a number of years going on beyond where they actually thought they would have a child after hearing this truth from God, you're going to birth a nation. And so Sarah took it into her own hands. She decided, I'll help God along. I'll move this situation. And so she asked her servant, a slave that they had in their household, to come together with her husband and give the two of them a child. She felt that this was the only way that it could happen. And Hagar is the name of the slave. And so Hagar and Abram, this is his name before God changed his name, they have this son, and his name's Ishmael. And this is all in Genesis. They're going through this situation that now Sarah has taken things in her own hands, and she's moved ahead of what God's will was. So, of course, the child born by the slave handmaiden servant becomes a thorn in her side and becomes something of a reminder that God promised her something and she couldn't wait for it. And now look what she's wrought for herself. So moving ahead, then God actually moves in his own timing to bless Abraham and Sarah with a child. And when that child is born, they call him Isaac, and he is just the joy of their lives. So the other little boy, the older boy, Ishmael, is 11, and he is actually mocking and making fun of the new little one. And so Sarah says, you got to get out. She sends Hagar out into the desert with her son Ishmael, and Abraham gives them a loaf of bread and a skin of water. Now, this is a pretty devastating kind of story here, where you literally have this, it's the desert, a woman, a young child. That's it, bread and water. But God cares for them while they're in the desert and takes care of her and hears her cry. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you've got Abraham and Sarah moving forward into what God has for them. But there's a allegory there in that story, in that Hagar represents the works that we engage in as human beings, as people, where we are engaged in works and we're trying to earn our way into things, because Hagar was a slave and she didn't have a natural place in the family. As long as she was doing the things that she was ordered to do, then she could say, look, I've earned my keep, I've earned my food, I've earned my right to be in the household because I've done what you've asked me to do. And that is what we Christians sometimes get caught up in, where we are saying to ourselves, I'm in Bible study, I'm serving at church, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, which all of that is excellent and we should do it. But when we hold it up as a reason why we should have salvation or a reason why we should feel good about ourselves as Christians, that's as filthy rags, and God doesn't have any place for that, because there's only one reason for us to be admitted to the kingdom, and that is our trust in Jesus Christ. We trust him, we come to know him as our Savior, and that is what redeems us and makes us ready. When we do that, we become co-heirs with him, and we are family, as we saw with Sarah, who didn't have to really do anything. She didn't have to justify her being there in the home because she was family, and that was her position. Her position was the wife and someone who belonged in that household, not having to do anything to justify or to maintain her presence there by saying, look, I've done this, I've done that. She'd gone all of those years being married to Abraham without them ever having any children. So she didn't have anything that she had to do. So the comparison for us is to say to ourselves, am I doing something that is, am I doing this for God's glory? Am I serving in this capacity? Am I studying the word? Am I, whatever it is that we're doing, are we doing that so that we can draw closer to God and experience more of him and have a closer relationship with him and glorify him because we are co-heirs with Christ and we belong? Or are we still hearing the mocking voice, the kind of, you need to do this, this, and this. You have to do this, this, and this. You have to prove that you're saved. You have to prove that you're here or there or wherever you might be placed. You have to prove that you have a reason to be there in the kingdom because you have to earn your way through. We can't earn our way into God's favor. We can't do anything except Jesus Christ and then walk with him, being obedient to what he has for us to do. So when we were talking, we actually discussed some of this in a Bible study recently, and we were talking about it. And one of the points that was being made by a number of the women in the room was that we definitely fall into this when we hear, well, you're not doing enough. Or maybe we're judging others, maybe our husband or our kids, you're not doing enough. You're supposed to be here in your walk, or you're supposed to be participating in this and that. There's nothing wrong with encouraging, inviting, asking people to go to church, praying, etc. But we can't say that one person is in one position or place on their walk with God and that they should be in another based on our observations. A friend of mine said that she felt like the reason why she spent so much more time in the Word in comparison to what she observed her husband doing, none of us are with our husbands 24 hours a day, so we don't know when they spend time in the Word. We don't know when they pray. We don't know what they're doing. It's not our job to police them. But she said the Lord convicted her in saying, you actually need more time because it takes longer for you to learn than it does for him. And that was a lesson for her that when she shared, we all kind of smiled and laughed, because all wives have a tendency to say, we should do X for Bible study. We should do that, to try to kind of take over the leadership and the head of the home in directing what should be done with our Christian walk. And that's not what God has for us. So I encourage you to, first, we have to know that we are heirs with Christ when we accept him into our hearts, repent of our sins, and become a part of the kingdom of God. And then after that, we are going to study the word. We are going to walk with him. We are going to learn and grow. But we're not going to do it because we're trying to prove to God that we belong, but because we want that closer relationship. The only thing we have to do to come into being co-heirs with Christ is to accept him and to walk with him after that. So that's the daily encouragement. And so also, urbanfamilytalk.com, American Family Radio can be found at afr.net. We are going to be having our guest when we get back. It's Catherine Davis, founder and president of the Restoration Project. And we're going to be talking later on in the program more. We're going to get into what I expected it to be not the friendliest of meetings when the president joined together with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And clearly it wasn't. It sounds as if they were at daggers and loggerheads with each other. But I still think the president's going to be able to pull something off. And also, Leader McConnell has announced that they're going to move forward with voting on the First Step Act. And so there's a lot of commotion going on in the background about that. Some people support it, some people don't. We will discuss all of that and more right here on Stacey on the Right when we get back.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call ** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call ** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Both of our sons excelled in athletics in high school. However, Brian was a better basketball player than he was a football player. So Karen and I were a little bit concerned when Brian tried out for the football team. Not because he didn't have the ability, but because the team was very good. He tried out for the team, went to the practices, the various cuts were made, and each time his name was still on the list. He was still being considered to make the team. We knew the final cut was coming up, and I was anxious that day. He came home from practice, smiled, and said, "Hey, Dad, I made the team." It's a good feeling to be chosen, isn't it? You know, for years I've often placed a verse under my signature. I guess you could say it's my life verse. It's John chapter 15, verse 16. Listen to these sweet, wonderful words from Jesus. "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you." That opening line really grabs my attention. I love the comfort and security of these words. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit. We're not an afterthought in the mind of God. He selected us and gave us an assignment, something to do. Here's what I want you to remember today. You didn't even have to try out for God's team. That's amazing. He sent his Spirit to rule you and call you. You've not only made the team, but God wants you to be a productive member of the team. He's given you a place of meaning and a place to make a contribution. Now let's get in the game and make a difference.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org. Join Crawford tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome Catherine Davis, founder and president of the Restoration Project. Thank you, Catherine, for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about the Restoration Project. Tell the listeners what it is exactly.
The Restoration Project is a pro-life, pro-family, pro-education organization that right now is dedicated to life, because if we don't have life, we certainly don't have a family, and there is no education. So right now I have spent time educating about abortion and its impact in the Black community, with an eye toward pointing us back towards family. You know, family used to be a big deal in the Black community, and getting us back on track with family so that we can then begin to focus and improve our education system.
So let's talk a little bit about a story that was just in the news. It's still kind of roiling through the different parts of the pro-life movement, which is that we had Justice Kavanaugh and the head justice over the Supreme Court, Justice Roberts, both decide that they didn't want to hear a case or a couple of cases that had to do with defunding Planned Parenthood in states like Kansas and Louisiana. And so I myself have been very disappointed about Justice Kavanaugh and Chief Justice Roberts deciding that they didn't want to have anything to do with the cases just because Planned Parenthood was tangentially involved. It really has to do with whether or not Medicaid can make a decision about what providers they will or will not pay to, much less about Planned Parenthood specifically. But they declined to hear the case because I guess it's so close to Judge Kavanaugh actually becoming a justice on the Supreme Court and the contentious nature of his confirmation hearings, especially around the pro-life issue. How do we move past this now that we see that he's going to kind of maybe veer away from that, as a movement, as a group of people who want to see less funding of Planned Parenthood?
That's a very good question that I'm not sure I really have an answer to, because I was stunned to read that, coming out the gate already, he's positioning himself in not a good place to abide by the Constitution. I mean, the whole hearing was about whether or not he was going to make decisions based on what the Constitution actually says, rather than the fictions that they've created. And he backed away from that coming out of the gate. So I'm not sure of even how to take that. But when we raise the question of Planned Parenthood is very heavily financed, a large part of it from taxpayers' pockets. Mm-hmm. And so they have a network that they employ to make sure that their agenda is remaining intact. And that's something that needs to change. They should no longer be able to they should have never gotten it in the first place, but they should no longer be able to get taxpayer money to do anything, actually. Because, I'm sorry?
I know, I was going to agree with you. It's not just the $558 million. The reason that they appealed that they sued these states about the defunding at the state level is because they get much more than the $558 million a year from the Planned Parenthood funding from the federal government. They actually get $1.2 billion, and those are 2015 dollars. I'm sure the 2018 numbers is even higher, for abortion funding through Medicaid reimbursements. And that's what this fight was really about, whether or not Medicaid can defund them. I guess my question for you is, though, Catherine, are you feeling like this is something that portends to the future, that he's actually going to swing to the liberal wing, or do you think that this particular case is just too close on the heels of his confirmation and maybe he's just too afraid to dip his toe in?
I am hoping that it's the latter. I'm hoping that he is using this time to get acclimated to the court before he wades in deep on such a heavy issue such as Medicaid funding for a state's ability to decide who they're going to give their Medicaid funding to. I have to hope that. Now, realistically, what it looks like when we look at it is he's signaling he is not as conservative on the life issue as the pro-life community thought. I'm hoping that's not the case, and that there will be more opportunities in the future for him to really, determine where he is on the life issue.
So, yeah, I can see where you would say that. I'm with you. I'm not willing to write him off just yet, but it is interesting that on this first large case having to do with Planned Parenthood, he would side. But also lost in the conversation is Justice Roberts. Why would he swing to the left liberal wing on an issue like this when he has traditionally, except for Obamacare, been a solid Republican? He was appointed by a Republican, et cetera. Like, what is going on here?
Well, Justice Roberts let the nation know with Obamacare where he stood on the life issue. I don't know why he voted the way he did on Obamacare, other than to wonder if there was some way that he was being coerced or his arm was being twisted in some way. But again, it's hard to speculate on, are they going to stay there? Are they going to come back to what's actually in the Constitution? What are they going to do? because the promise was that he was going to follow what the Trump administration appointed him to do. And so the fact that he so quickly ran away, because, Trump is supposed to be, as many think, the most pro-life president we've ever had. And I would have thought he would have taken the opportunity to thank the Trump administration for standing with him through that contentious Kavanaugh, through the contentious hearing. But I'm puzzled by it. I am absolutely puzzled by both gentlemen, Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh, because they didn't follow the mandate that I thought they were handed through their appointments to the court. So I'm confused.
Yeah, I am too. It's I wish that we could get some kind of explanation as to why he did what he did, but I guess we now have to kind of wait it out and continue to prayerfully lift him up and hope that he'll be more courageous at the next opportunity. I wanted to turn to some good news for the pro-life movement, which has been, it's not often we have really good news, but new information out of the CDC says that the number of abortions in this country is down significantly over the past couple of years. The numbers for 2015 and 2016 and 2017 per the CDC have abortions, another 300,000 less abortions per year in this country. What do you attribute that to?
I attribute it to many women being better educated, but I have to be careful in what I'm getting ready to say to you right now. There has been a decline overall in the numbers, but not in the black community. The black community is increasing or holding steady at about somewhere between 30 to 40% of the abortions are being performed on black women. So while the overall numbers are decreasing, that's more in the Caucasian community than in the other communities, while organizations like Planned Parenthood are stepping up their targeting of what they say is women of color or colored women, as they would say back in the day. So their targeting has not diminished. In fact, it's increased in communities of color rather than decreasing. But in the Caucasian community, I think they see that the population control effect is taking place, and they realize their numbers are so diminished that they're no longer having enough children to reproduce themselves, and so they are making the quote choice to have their children rather than terminate their lives in abortion.
Well, I'll take it for whatever the driving reason is. I'll take it because we do need more Americans, and we need more Americans to have families of a little bit larger size instead of 1 or 2 children, maybe 3 or perhaps 4 children, because we shouldn't be replacing our population through immigration. And I think when we're talking about this, first of all, it is an atrocious thing because the black community would be at 18-19% of the population right now if it weren't for abortion. Right now we see 18 to 19% of the population is actually Hispanic, and our numbers as black Americans remain stagnant at about 13.8, and it's traditionally been 12%, so that's a teensy little bump, but nothing when you look at the number of abortions that are being had in the country. And I believe we're throwing away our treasure, and this is for any group of people that are having abortions. We're throwing away our treasure, and God can't bless that. And so we have to turn it around. So let's talk a little bit about the messaging. Your organization, the Restoration Project, you seek to restore a lot of different things for young women, especially those who are in the childbearing years, through them making pro-life choices. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I want to say something here, too, before we move on to, well, it's actually a combination of both. The black community is being targeted by the abortion industry, and we would be way more than 18% of the population if we weren't engaging in abortion at the levels that we are. We are somewhere between 12 and 13% of the population, but we need to recognize that only 3% of us at any given point in time are of childbearing age. So that is a huge disproportionate impact. And now we know that more than 20 million black children have died in abortion since Roe v. Wade. If you look at the fact that those 20 million, many of those 20 million would have had children themselves, 1 to 2 children themselves. Let's say they would have had 2 or 3. Then we're talking a whole exponentially greater number of African Americans being available in this population. But the abortion industry was birthed out of a population-controlled, segregationist, eugenicist mindset. If you go back and you look at what was going on in the 70s, you will see that there was a movement of which Planned Parenthood was a large part and proponent to legalize abortion to control the black birth rate. And in fact, you have recordings, because, you know, Richard Nixon recorded everything he said in the Oval Office. You have recordings of him saying that he knew what was going to be aborted with a little black bastard. His words, not mine. And so it was launched in an effort to control our birth rate in particular, but the overall population in general. The fact that Planned Parenthood has consistently waged a war against the black community through abortion ever since then is a tragedy that has risen to genocidal levels. So now we're no longer just talking about a woman choosing, but we're talking about an organization that daily takes measures to prevent birth in the black community, which according to the laws of the United States is genocide. And that is what is happening with black women, to the point that Planned Parenthood even tweeted out on Halloween that it's safer for a black woman to abort her child than to have her child or carry it to term. So they are now pushing an agenda that says black children are like a disease and you got to get rid of it. Come to us, we'll help you get rid of it, because lest you die. There's something inherently wrong with that, and there's something inherently wrong with a whole generation of young black women who believe that abortion is their friend, because that's what they're constantly being fed, and now they're giving them a spirit of fear to say, don't have children because you're going to die. But they're certainly not telling them about the numbers of women that are dying in these abortion centers, which are so squalid, many of them. Most states can't even begin to tell you what condition the insides of those clinics are.
Yeah,
I
think we do, and that's why I encourage people to watch the movie Gosnell. We have had a number of Planned Parenthood clinics close, and we've also had a number of private clinics around the country that have had to shut down because of additional scrutiny that they weren't under before, no inspections, et cetera. And they're not safe places. Remember, the Democrats have said for just years and years and years that they want safe, legal, and rare. And abortion in America today is none of those things. And so we've got to have a heavenly mindset about this. That, as you stated, I think one of the most important things that you've said today, Catherine, is that we're aborting the future, and the eugenicists get to laugh and win when we destroy human lives in the womb. Thank you so much for coming on today, Catherine Davis, founder and president of the Restoration Project. I'll share the video that you sent to me in the YouTube and different streams that we have online. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me. God
All right.
bless.
Talk to you again soon. God bless you. We'll be back with more right after this.
Want to does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
The night that Leanne Toohey saw Michael Orr cold and alone walking the streets of Memphis, she didn't see God's overarching plan. She didn't know that she and her family would mentor this young man to receive an education and a place in NFL history. All she knew that rainy night was that Michael needed help. When God calls us to act, we get to be a part of His divine intentions. Ephesians says we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. But these good works, whether it's a call to love, to mentor, or to reach out, are never about us. They're about God.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be His ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Christmas time is here, and you'll forgive lawmakers, Capitol Hill aides, and congressional journalists for lacking tidings of comfort and joy. They're all too familiar with various phantasms depicting Christmas past, Christmas present, and yes, Christmas future on Capitol Hill. Although it's been said many times, many ways, December can be wretched in Congress. The holidays on Capitol Hill are usually filled with Christmas Eve Day votes on Obamacare, efforts to avert government shutdowns, brawls over spending. New Year's gets ruined too. The Senate began votes on New Year's Day 2013, not long after the ball dropped. This year's Christmas festival involves a potential government shutdown on December 22nd, unless there's a deal on President Trump's border wall. Call that the nightmare before Christmas. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, what we have is a difference of understanding about what's happening at the border. You know, the president has been very clear from when he ran for office that he wants to protect America's border and keep this country safe. And now more than ever, when you see the caravan, I know what Lindsey Graham was talking about, you've got thousands of people literally saying we're just going to storm your border and come into the country. And oh, by the way, we have at least 600 known convicted criminals as part of this caravan. These aren't people seeking asylum, by the way, Sandra. They were offered asylum and jobs in Mexico and turned it down. So let's not talk about asylum. It's whether or not we're going to have rule of law in the country. And by the way, we let 1 million people a year into our country legally. There's a legal process. There are thousands of people waiting to come to this country the right way. Follow the rules. And the president said if you want to seek asylum, there's a way to do it. That's not what this is about.
Welcome back to the program. Find more at StacyOnTheRight.com and at StacyOnTheRight on Twitter and Instagram. You are listening to Steve Scalise explaining why border security really is, it's not about preventing asylum. It's not about asylum. None of the things that are being done right now have anything to do with trying to increase or decrease the number of asylum claims. The fact is, most of the claims for asylum are actually bogus. It's really not about that. There are strict parameters under which a person can claim asylum for any country, but specifically for the U.S., you know, it's not something that's easy to do. Asylum means you're fleeing your home country and going to the next available country, the next country that borders your country, and you're going there because you're literally afraid for your life. And I know it's not It's not popular, but the fact is, if you're in El Salvador or Guatemala, the next country adjacent to you is not the United States. So it's not about trying to prevent people from making asylum claims. The asylum claims can be made. You can ask for asylum. It doesn't mean you're automatically owed it or that you're going to get it. And the number of people who are confused about this just continues to ramp up, not just here in this country, but in the countries where these people are coming from. According to Customs and Border Protection, and this is their commissioner, Kevin McLellan, he said on Tuesday that the rate at which illegal immigrant family units have entered the U.S. in the last 30 days, they will more than double last year's record number of family units. More than double. And remember, this isn't about actually getting an approval on an asylum claim. All you have to do is get into the country, and you're here to stay. There's no one to get you back out. His quote continues, "At the border, we face changing trends in illegal crossings that impact security, exploit our laws, and challenge our resources and personnel. To put this aspect of our mission in context, one day of crossings last Monday, December 3rd, highlights the trends that we are confronting. On that day, we saw the highest number of arrivals at our southwest border in years. 3,029 illegal entries in inadmissible persons arrived at our border last Monday. 3,000 people in one day. 85% of them crossed illegally, which is why the president wants to change the asylum laws to say if you cross illegally, you can't file for asylum. It basically shuts that spigot off. Because if you're thinking, well, all I have to do is get in the country, then I can file for asylum, I'll go in illegally, and you then do that, then you find out, oh no, I can't actually file a claim for asylum. I've cut my own opportunity to do that off, so now I'm going to be deported. That would be an immediate deterrent, because people who really wanted to file asylum claims would go to a lawful point of entry or to a U.S. consulate where they could apply for asylum in the U.S. Now, CBP apprehended or encountered 1,731 members of family groups and 350 unaccompanied children. What kind of a person do you have to be to send your child unaccompanied to the border of another country? Just go. Just go on up there. Just see if you can get in. So this means that the illegal crossings and inadmissibles last Monday included over 1,100 children in a single day. This snapshot is emblematic of the steady trends that we've seen for many months, increasing crossings overall, with a dramatic surge in a percentage of family units and a growing proportion of Central Americans coming to the border. More broadly, for the last 30 days, we've seen over 2,000 unlawful entries between ports and undocumented arrivals at ports of entry each day. Over 1,070 family members are arriving on a consistent basis. To put this in perspective, will more than double last year's record number of family units at this rate. Now, some people want to say, well, this is, it's lower than other historic peaks. There have been other times where there have been more. And that is true. But McLellan actually, his quote is, "I fundamentally disagree with this assessment. From the experience of our agents and officers on the ground, it is indeed both border security and a humanitarian crisis." So instead of trying to have all these people camped out at the border between the United States and Mexico, we should be helping them in their home countries, which we are already doing. And I think that's the part that is so frustrating to Americans, especially people who are really trying to keep up with the onslaught of information. And that is that we are doing something. America has sent and is sending billions of dollars in aid to countries around the world, to include those south of our border. We are providing aid. We have relief agencies in those countries. We're doing everything we can to bring about a system and a end to the humanitarian crisis. But instead, we're seeing even more people saying, we're just not going to stay here. We're not going to hang around here and handle this in our own home country. So Scalise had a little bit more to say about the security issue at the southern border. It's number 4.
The border funding is going to be the big battle in these next 11 days. And the president's negotiating with the Senate right now, House and Senate, Republican and Democrat. The president's laid out very clearly. He wants $5 billion. And it's not just to build the wall. Clearly, that's a big part of it. But it's for all the other technology and supporting things that our Border Patrol agents need. They're attacking, by the way, our Border Patrol agents, some of these people in this caravan, literally attacking Border Patrol agents. We ought to give them the tools to be safe as they protect our border.
We need protection for them as well. So, and that's what he's talking about. The families of Border Patrol agents have every right to expect that their family members, men and women who work for U.S. Customs and Border Enforcement, Border Patrol, all of the different agencies, Homeland Security, any of the agencies that have people, men and women, down at the southern border working, they should not have to worry about their loved ones not being able to come home from work because they've been, smacked over the head with bricks and bottles and rocks, etc. They're attacked. They're physically assaulted while doing their duties down on the southern border. We need to put a stop to that. We need better aerial protection. We need better eyes in the sky patrolling those areas. And we need a border, an actual impenetrable fence/wall system that will prevent people from simply crossing over into our country willy-nilly whenever they feel like it. It's unpopular because most people want to appear to be kind-hearted and friendly towards illegal immigrants. And I get it. It's better. Sounds better at parties, makes you feel like a really great person when people are running around saying, well, the thing is, we do have room in our country for these people, and we should let everyone in, and we shouldn't turn people away. Yeah, okay, nice to say. But operationally, we know that's not the way people feel because they're not actually taking these people into their own homes. You don't see the same people who are talking all this drama about how we need to have more people from other countries in our country, accepting them into their extra, spare bedroom. You have a finished basement. You have any extra space in your home at all. Why not fill it up with illegal immigrants? Oh, then you start to hear a different tune. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our government doing it. Well, yeah. So that means you don't really believe that. People don't really believe this nonsense that they're spouting off about who should and shouldn't be in the country illegally. Now, President Trump has been very clear, and he was actually at this 2018 Project Safe Neighborhoods Conference in Kansas City, Missouri. And there's a quote from his speech there where he started off praising William Barr, who was a former Attorney General of the United States, appointed there by President George H.W. Bush. And Barr is actually going to be the replacement for Jeff Sessions as U.S. Attorney General. And of course, he'll have to get through the confirmation process, but he's the person that's been selected by the president. And so, he was talking about this issue at our southern border, but in general, because 40% of the people who are here illegally are visa overstays. And he said American politicians should protect, this is President Trump, should protect American citizens, not criminal aliens. Not one more American life should be stolen because of radical politicians pursuing their open borders agenda. And, this is connected up because during his previous tenure, William Barr actually had an unwavering adherence to the rule of law. He was someone who it was very capable at that point and is still very capable and able to do this job. My hope is that whether it's border security or visa overstays or enforcing our laws on, gun prosecutions, prosecuting straw purchasers, prosecuting people who deal drugs illegally, any of the law enforcement issues that we're facing in this country, my hope is that William Barr, if confirmed, that he would be strictly constitutionally minded and adhere to the laws of the United States and want to prosecute people regardless of their political affiliations or connections. And that's not a statement against Jeff Sessions, who I personally spent a lot of time on the radio when it was during his confirmation process talking about the fact that he wasn't a racist. That was just a horrible smear tactic that was used against then Jeff Sessions. It was used against him because they didn't have anything else they could say because he was an excellent candidate. His recusal, I think, was the straw that broke the camel's back between his relationship with him and the president. And I don't know why he did that, other than Mueller and some others kind of probably wrung, his wrists about doing it and convinced him that it was the right thing to do. And I'm not completely convinced that it was. I actually think it was the wrong thing for him to do, to recuse himself. But he did it, and that was what started him on the path to no longer being the Attorney General under this president. And so we're going to see what happens with William Barr. I don't actually have an opinion one way or the other whether or not he should be the president's pick. It seems like he would have had someone in mind, as long as the president has been, over these last months, publicly considering no longer having Jeff Sessions in that role. And there's another quote from the president. He was talking about the ICE officers working with state and local partners, and he used this this speech to this law enforcement group to talk about illegal immigration, to talk about crime prosecutions and the enforcement of the law, and to talk about Project Safe Neighborhoods, which is something that was started by former Attorney General John Ashcroft way back in 2001. And the quote from the president is, "Every day our brave ICE officers are working with the state and local partners to get some of the world's most violent criminals off our streets. We get them out of our country." I'm paraphrasing. We get them out. "Since I took office, ICE agents have arrested over 235,000 aliens with criminal records." Think of that. 235,000, and then you have a lot on the Democrat side. They're saying, we don't want to respect ICE. We want to get rid of ICE. We're not getting rid of ICE. They're going to be with us. They're heroes. And he talks about how those 235,000 criminal illegal aliens included those charged and convicted of more than 100,000 assaults and more than 4,000 murders. Now, these are statistics that we've been talking about here on the show for quite a while. It's great to hear the president share this information in a speech to law enforcement officials to kind of bring to bear the seriousness of the issue that we're facing here. But there's more to it than that, even. We're talking about the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol and ICE seizing more than 2.8 million pounds of illicit narcotics. They've quadrupled the seizures of fentanyl. And now, of course, there's a new deal between the president and President Xi of China. And he's saying he hopes that we won't have to worry so much about trying to root out illicit fentanyl because of the cooperation of the Chinese government. And I do hope that's true, because that is a part of the narcotics problem that's going on. The opioid epidemic is rooted in that, prescription fentanyl and then other drugs being laced with fentanyl, and people don't know it. And so the president went on to talk about removing the vicious poisons, the deadly predators, and depending upon partnerships with local communities. And that kind of points us, obviously the sanctuary cities is something that the president, he still talks about it occasionally, but it's not as big of an issue because the sanctuary cities are still going on. And what's happening is ICE is upping enforcement in areas that have sanctuary status. In a sanctuary city, when they say they'll no longer cooperate with with Border Patrol and ICE, then ICE has to do mass arrests, which you heard about the one in New Jersey where they picked up over 100 people. And so what happens? Well, activists say they're arresting good people who haven't done any crimes. Well, they're actually arresting the criminals that they're targeting, plus anyone nearby who is in the country illegally. And it is a direct result of the sanctuary city status, because they don't have anybody to work with to help them pick and choose who they're trying to pick up. This is a huge issue. I'm glad the president is he's so tuned in on it, and we should be praying and uplifting him and the men and women of ICE and those who are tasked with this responsibility, that they would do their jobs well. All right, that's the show. You have onenewsnow.com news and information, and then we'll be right back.
Urban Family Talk.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump says a strong border policy is working, but there's more work to be done, and that includes funding for a wall on the southern border.
Illegal traffic dropped 72%, then ultimately 95% once the wall was up. In Tucson, Arizona, illegal traffic dropped 92%. Yuma, it dropped illegal traffic 95 to 96%. I mean, and that when I say dropped, the only reason we even have any percentage where people got through is because they walk and go around areas that aren't built. It dropped virtually 100% in the areas where the wall is. So, I mean, it's very effective. If you really want to find out how effective a wall is, just ask Israel.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, along with House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, say they have offered the president a solution.
We offered the president two ways to avoid a shutdown. First, pass the 6 other appropriations bills that have been agreed to by Democrats and Republicans and do a 1-year extension of the Homeland Security bill by what's called a CR, which just funds it the same way it funded it last year. Or do a 1-year CR for all 7 remaining appropriations bills.
More border wall coverage at onenewsnow.com. The head of Google has been on the hot seat today on Capitol Hill. Here's Fox's Rachel Sutherland.
Google's not the only game in town when it comes to searching the web, but there was a guy dressed as Monopoly Man at a House Judiciary hearing where CEO Sundar Pichai denied allegations the company manipulates search results.
I lead this company without political bias and work to ensure that our products continue to operate that way.
Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte said he believes Google steers its content.
Google employees have thought about doing this, talked about doing this, and have done it.
Democrat Jerry Nadler called allegations of political bias a right-wing conspiracy theory. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
A woman who accused a former Baylor University student of raping her at a frat party says she's outraged his plea deal includes no jail time. A judge accepted the plea bargain Monday for Jacob Walter Anderson. The former fraternity president agreed to plead no contest to a lesser charge of unlawful restraint. The woman released a statement saying she now has to live not only with the repercussions of the rape, but also the knowledge that the local justice system is severely broken. In what is another example of an attempt to suppress free speech, a Pennsylvania public university charged a student group an unconstitutionally excessive security fee. Here's AFN's Bob Kellogg.
Alliance Defending Freedom sent a letter to the University of Pittsburgh last week on behalf of the Young America's Foundation because the school charged the group more than $5,500 for security for an appearance by conservative Ben Shapiro. ADF attorney Jonathan Larkham says that amounts to a heckler's veto.
They told college Republicans and Young America's Foundation that if they didn't pay the fee, there would be no lecture. So what this amounts to is an unconstitutional security fee and an unconstitutional heckler's veto.
Though the group of Republicans had signed a contract with Pitt months in advance, Larkham says the school sprung the excessive fee on them just 2 days in advance.
This is a case where the university is essentially trying to say, yeah, we're going to let you have free speech, but it's not going to be free. For free speech to be truly free, the government can't have the ability to tax it or to put a fine on it in any way.
Larkham says the letter asks the university to rescind the security fee and modify its speech policy or face a lawsuit. I'm Bob Kellogg.
And British Prime Minister Theresa May plans to travel to Dublin tomorrow to continue her whirlwind tour to rescue her so-called Brexit deal. Downing Street said May will meet with Ireland's Prime Minister tomorrow afternoon following a cabinet session in London. Find more news at onenewsnow.com. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Thanks for listening.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We just brought a new White House counsel today who just started, who's going to be fabulous. The president announced his pick for Attorney General, who will be quite good as well. And right now in the White House, we have a lot of good people who are just working along, and the president will make the right choice for Chief of Staff when he's ready.
If you hire an attorney, you're hiring an attorney to make sure it's done legally in the process. So, and if you're going to try to impeach a president over a campaign finance problem, campaign finance problems are usually fines, which a number of members have. I wonder how they felt about whether they should stay in their job.
If the document that the judge was given was paid for by a political party and the opposing candidate, and it was never verified, and it's not verified to this day, what happens to those who submit the document to the court? If they're not punished, you're going to reinforce doing this in the future.
When politics weren't involved and national security and border security were on their minds, they did the right thing, and we hope they'll do the right thing here. The Democrats have a central question in front of them, Bill. Do they want to keep the government open, or do they want to keep the borders open?
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here. We have Cassie Smedile, who is the RNC national spokesperson. She's going to come on and give us the insider scoop on the big throwdown at the White House today between Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the president. And I don't mind telling you, it seemed like one of those days where there would be fireworks, and it sounds like it didn't disappoint. And it's not that I'm looking for them to have these big fights or arguments or anything, but clearly the Democrats have abandoned their previous position that they recently held. It's not like the dark ages or in the 50s or 60s or something like that. We're talking about recent history, that they not only voted to support a border wall, funding it, getting it completed, they voted to support increased money and support to our officers down there who are patrolling the border. Honestly, their position was identical to that of the Republicans. So what's changed? Oh, that's right. Somebody figured out that if you allow illegal immigrants to continue to pour into the country, you can radically change the makeup of a nation. And so instead of having Bible-thumping, gun-toting Republicans who happen to be white, you have a bunch of people from third world countries who will be willing to vote in any socialist policy you want. And there you have it. So let's listen to Newt Gingrich now. He's talking about blowing the whistle on Mueller. He calls Mueller's investigation the Trump Destruction Project. It's number one.
Sure. I mean, look, you have to understand, Mueller's not involved in a investigation. Mueller has a Trump Destruction Project. He brought on a team, all of them dedicated to destroying Trump. They've done everything they could to destroy Trump. And part of that technique, which frankly, Sidney Powell described brilliantly in her book, License to Lie, about the Justice Department, part of that technique is you throw the kitchen sink. You basically threaten somebody and say, I'm going to bankrupt you. I'm going to put your son in jail. I'm going to charge you with so many different crimes, you'll never get out from under it. Now, would you like to talk? And when you have the full power of the federal government against you, it's pretty tough not to try to find a way to get them off your back. But it has nothing to do with the truth. It has nothing to do with justice. And Mueller, I think, in a really sad, historians someday will comment that this was one of the most extraordinary efforts to undo the will of the American people by an established bureaucracy and its establishment friends that we've seen in all of American history.
But will historians see it that way? And that my question, honestly, I'm not being facetious at all. Will historians see it that way, or will historians with a leftist ideological viewpoint, people who've spent their entire adult lives in echo chambers with nothing but liberals? They don't know a conservative. They don't know a Republican. They don't even know a Christian. Or will they say these people are heroes because they were doing the work that only they could do because they had to get rid of Donald Trump? They had to get him out of office. They couldn't allow him to serve a full term. They couldn't allow him to be reelected, which I do believe is a distinct possibility that the president gets reelected. If you look around at places that are further along the socialist spectrum, that they said yes to socialism and, you know, thank you, may I have another, look at Paris, France. You've got Macron actually begging for his people to give him another chance to set things right. He has bought so deeply into the climate change agenda that he's willing to literally run hardworking French people into the poorhouse. Also, he can sit around at these big fancy events with other world leaders and have them pat him on the back and say, I'm doing a lot in my country for climate change. My citizens pay an extraordinarily high level of tax if they want to use fossil fuels, even though there aren't any other options for them. They need to get where they're going. They already own cars that run on fossil fuels, and he wants to tax them into oblivion. And he's surprised that they're burning things to the ground. Now, the natural next thought is, well, Democrats here in this country will see that following along with the climate agenda, the people who worship the climate as their God, following along with that will lead us to a place where Americans are rioting in the streets and Americans are, you know, literally throwing people physically out of their offices to try to get rid of them because they're voting in these taxes. But the Democrats aren't learning anything from this. They are not looking across the ocean and saying, well, it doesn't look like it's working out for Macron. They're saying, oh, he's just not doing it right. He just doesn't know how to do it. So, yeah, historians obviously could say that this was the Trump destruction project and it had nothing to do with Russian collusion. But if you look at the headlines and check out the newspapers and what everyone is actually just writing about this, Trump might do jail time after he leaves office. For what? For what would he be doing jail time? What would he be convicted of exactly? I'm still waiting on the other shoe to drop with the collusion. Remember, that's the reason why he's investigating. Mueller is doing an investigation because President Trump, then candidate Trump, supposedly colluded with the Russians to materially impact the election. We've still not seen any of that. It's still wire fraud, bank fraud, you know, yada, 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 but nothing having to do with collusion. And it is not illegal for the president to continue to work on building a construction project in Moscow while he's running for the presidency. It might not be what other people would do. I'm wondering how he had the time to manage it. But again, he doesn't drink alcohol. He only sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night, and he doesn't smoke. Apparently, he has boundless energy, and he only eats fast food. I don't understand that. I don't understand how he lives like that. If I only ate fast food, I would barely be able to lift myself up out of the bed every day. But I'm not him. He's not me. I don't have to understand it for it to be true. It's really irrelevant what he eats, how much he sleeps, whether or not he drinks alcohol. What is relevant is, at the time, was it okay for him, lawful, I shouldn't say okay, was it lawful for the president to arrange to build or continue arrangements to build a Trump Tower Moscow, which would involve him dealing with some government types? And, you know, obviously in Russia, you have to grease palms. You know, you have to bribe folks. They don't have a functioning government like we do, where people do their job for their salary and that's it. They don't expect to be bribed. Having a bribe accompany your construction project request or your building permit request does not, no bribe is needed. Not here in this country. You don't have to do that. You don't have to take anybody out to lunch or promise that your third-born child will marry somebody else's, you know, firstborn child. You just put in your building permit application and you go on about your business and you wait. And as long as you've done everything according to the form, it gets approved and you move on. That's the way we operate here. But in Russia, the Ukraine, I mean, read the books about what the adoption process is like in Russia and the Ukraine and other Eastern Bloc nations. You have to bribe folks just to get them to put a stamp that shows that you actually visited their office and put in your application. So the idea that he wouldn't have had to talk to government officials or interact with them in any way in order to get a building project started is just ludicrous. And it is not illegal to build buildings in foreign countries. It just isn't. I guess it's only illegal if the person doing the building is last name Trump. So Gingrich goes on to make this point about the media coverage and how well President Trump is doing in spite of it. It's number 2.
Donald Trump, after 92% negative coverage for 2 years, 92% negative coverage for 2 years, is somewhere between 44 and 48% approval, depending on the poll. Ronald Reagan, about this point in 1983, was at 35%. The fact is that Macron, the wonder boy of France, is now down at 25 or 26% and just had the worst riots in Paris in 50 years. They operated on a premise, and of course, they all thought Hillary was going to win. So they never thought this would come to light. They thought they were helping the winner. And I think it was an enormous shock election night to suddenly start, for Comey in particular, to suddenly start realizing that his neck was on the line. He'd been breaking the law. But he always thought he'd be protected. Everybody near the Clintons have been protected.
And that's what's been happening. Everyone near the Clintons has not only been protected, but they all work together as a single entity with a hive mind. Everything is done to protect the Clintons, but it's also done in an effort to enlarge themselves, enriching themselves. Going into it's like going into a club and joining that club, and everyone in the club works for the benefit of everyone else in the club, but specifically the person who founded it. And that's, the Clinton couple. And so they're all, no matter what they say on their outside face, Comey, I'm a Republican, Mueller, I'm a Republican. When you look at their actions, they're actually a part of Clinton Inc. They do the bidding of the Clintons. Their work is aimed towards the Clintons. What benefits them, what protects them, what keeps them out of harm's way. So that has nothing to do with being a Republican. And the first thing we could do, if we're going to be accurate and not have, drifting terminology, is to just say, it doesn't really matter what your political affiliation is that you claim. Your actions are much more important. And if you're operating on behalf of the Clintons, then clearly you're not a Republican. And why is that important? Well, because people use that blanket endorsement. Well, Mueller is a Republican. That's meant to soften your criticism and blunt the effects of your disdain for his actions by getting you into a place where you can't seem to reconcile what he's doing with what he has purported to say about his political affiliation. Let's remind ourselves really quickly. It doesn't matter what his politics are. He could be politically agnostic. He's a career service appointee. So that means politics has zero to do with the functioning and execution of his job. He's supposed to do his job no matter what his politics are. If you look at it from that lens, you can see that there's a terrible travesty going on here. Hillary Clinton is continuing to be protected. She's not been prosecuted. She's going to get off scot-free for doing things that other people have gone to jail for. And we're going to continue to see what is just ridiculous. It's this investigation, obviously, but it's also the investigation of people around President Trump. They're being prosecuted not because of wrongdoing. They're finding wrongdoing, so I'm not excusing the wrongdoing, but they're not being prosecuted because they knew there was wrongdoing there. They're being prosecuted because they're close to the president. And that should be just totally unacceptable to us. So when we get back from the break, we're going to be talking to Cassie Smedile, National Press Secretary and spokesperson for the RNC, Republican National Committee. She's going to be coming on to talk to us about President Trump saying to Nancy Pelosi, I'm proud to shut down the government for border security. And remember, the government shutdown would encompass just a couple of agencies, 87% of the government would continue to function without any blip at all. So this is really overfunding over the border wall. And I don't think the CRs that they're suggesting have any merit. We need to move forward with funding the wall. So stay right there. We'll be back with more.
Here's American Family Association President Tim Wildman.
Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan, two Texans, support and believe in our ministry here at AFA and AFR.
We know more about the laundry business than anything else. We know a little bit about a lot of things, but we know a lot about the laundry and dry cleaning business.
They created a laundry detergent to sell to folks to support AFA.
We just want to be able to provide a product that can be used by AFA to support the ministry.
When you wash your family's clothes with Redeem Clean laundry detergent, you can take great satisfaction in knowing that you're supporting the vital work of the American Family Association. It's a unique way to increase your giving to AFA. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more about the Redeem Clean products when you visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. With all the claims and counterclaims about global warming, it is often hard to figure out what to believe. One thing I do know is that two of the loudest claims about a climate catastrophe on the horizon are based on erroneous assumptions. When I was in graduate school working on computer models, I learned that the assumptions about the data often determine the effectiveness of the models to predict future environmental events. The British scientific journal Nature published a study more than a month ago that warned that ocean temperatures rose 60% higher than estimated by the UN IPCC. The study was given wide exposure in the media. However, another researcher identified some errors in methodology, which the original researchers have admitted was the case. Unfortunately, you won't see any follow-up media reports about them overestimating the amount of ocean warming. A few weeks ago, the federal government issued its latest National Climate Assessment Report. The study calculates the huge cost due to the fact that the world will be 15 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by 2100. This assessment is even higher than the worst-case scenario predicted by the UN IPCC, which has been known to occasionally make some outlandish predictions as well. The writers of the report assume a massive increase in coal consumption and completely ignore the dramatic increase in natural gas production. If you take a more realistic view of conventional fuel use, the doomsday scenario vanishes. And it's worth mentioning that the sole editor of the report is an alumnus of the Center for American Progress, funded by climate activist and philanthropist Tom Steyer. It is often hard to know what to believe, especially when two of the most publicized climate studies have major errors within them. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view. Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate you listening to American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Go to afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com and check out our content over there, and check us out on Facebook as well. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome frequent guest of the program and one of our favorite experts, national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. It's Cassie Smedile. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's actually Kaylee McEnany calling in today.
Okay, you know what? Another favorite, Kaylee. So
yes, good to join you.
It's good to talk to you. I'm not sure why I have Cassie up here, but I'm excited to speak with you, Kaylee. And let's first just, the title of today's show was Fight, President Trump and Schumer and Pelosi and the wall. And I was expecting nothing less than for them to be a little contentious with each other. What happened?
Well, President Trump was fighting for the interests of the American people, which is to secure our southern border. I just was reading some statistics from the Department of Homeland Security, and they said that on average, 10 terrorists attempt to cross our border a day. And I had to read that 2 or 3 times just to ensure that I was reading it correctly, and I was, and that is from a DHS official who sent that out. So there are dire straits on our southern border, not to mention the 17,000 criminals who were apprehended trying to cross our southern border. It's important to have a wall. It's important to have a barrier to protect us. And today, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer once again exhibited they have zero interest in working on behalf of the American people and every interest in obstructing over the next 2 years and not getting anything done. So it was a bit contentious, but President Trump was a fighter. That's the right word to use. He fought for the American people today.
So I saw some statistics too, and I think a lot of different news organizations, especially at the news bites at the top of the hour and different places like cnsnews.com, all over the place online, people are sharing these salient points to kind of bring people back down to reality, which is we have a very dangerous situation at our southern border. And the president has done the best that he can with the military deployment. And also they've been putting up concertina wire and makeshift barriers. They've been strengthening and remodeling some of the wall down there, some sections of fencing. And that has been very effective. In fact, the president said last week in Kansas City that wherever they've put wall up and shored things up, it's been utterly effective. So how can we get across to the American people what we see as the truth here, Kaylee? The Democrats have completely flip-flopped on border security. They used to support these common sense measures.
That's right. They used to support border security and the structure on our southern border, but now they've decided to go hard left. They have to cater to that far left base that they are all trying to win to become their party's nominee, and they ignore the facts. A border wall works. As you noted, the president also pointed out that where we've had this fencing and this walling, it does work. In San Diego, for instance, where we've had structure since 1992, we've seen a 92% drop in illegal traffic all across where the wall has been placed. It has worked. The same in Yuma, a 95% decrease over 9 years. So when you have a southern barrier, it does effectively thwart illegal immigration, and it's important for us to expose Democrats how far they've come. They've come so far to the point where now you have Nancy Pelosi saying that she had come up with the measure to cure our problems on the southern border, and that was mowing the grass to stop smugglers. She literally said that verbatim. It's an incredible place that they've arrived at, and it's a place that's out of step with the broader American public that wants border security, as polling tells us.
I just wonder if she'd have that same attitude if her mansion in California was overrun with gypsies or homeless people or whatever. I don't care what kind of people it is. The point is people who don't live with her, people who aren't authorized to live in her home. If her home was overrun by these types of individuals, would she be okay with it? And anybody who wants to can just Google Nancy Pelosi's home, and it's a palatial mansion. It's an estate, gorgeous home. I've got nothing against it. I believe you should buy whatever you want with your own money, do whatever you want to do. I applaud success, and I think it's wonderful when people make money and they earn it and they're able to buy things that they want with it. But this does not look like a home that's in a neighborhood where there would be a lot of illegal immigrants present.
No, and I'm sure it's not the case. And as you noted, just the breathtaking hypocrisy. They say they don't want border security, that a wall is somehow racist and xenophobic, as they've said. But nevertheless, you have Nancy Pelosi, who has a lock on her door, and I assume she locks it at night, so she secures herself while neglecting the safety of the American people, and the same individuals who want to abolish the Second Amendment. Several of them, certainly in Hollywood, are protected by armed guards. And then, of course, Chuck Schumer today, who goes out and says, how dare the president threaten to shut down the government over his policy priority, when in fact Chuck Schumer 11 months ago shut down the government during the Schumer shutdown and put at bay and on hold the funding for low-income American children, and he put that on hold and shut down the government to protect DACA recipients. So there's a lot of breathtaking hypocrisy here on any number of issues, and we saw a lot of it on full display today in the Oval Office.
I love how you have all the stats on the Schumer shutdown, because you know what, Kaylee? We forgot. Okay, so the American people, including myself, We forget when these things happen. Like, it happens, and at the time it's huge news, and then you move on, and we need you to remind us, because now that right there is some, you call it glaring hypocrisy, and I think you're being kind. That's the kind of hypocrisy that hits you in the face and you don't wake up for a few days because you've been bowled over. That is some pretty stunning information. If you look at the quote from Schumer, he says today, well, you've mentioned this 20 times, so you want the shutdown. This is what he said to the president earlier today. Meanwhile, he did have, now that you've said it, of course, now I can remember, it was the Schumer shutdown, and it was a big deal.
That's right, and it's easy to forget because the news cycle is so quick. But Schumer literally went on basically a sermon today against shutdowns. I mean, it wasn't just one time. He kept doubling back to the point of, it can't be my way or the highway, or we shut down the government. Shutting down the government's irresponsible. He made a good 10 sentences of anti-shutdown quotations for us to have, all the while completely neglecting his own shutdown. I mean, it's really, really incredible. So now all of a sudden a shutdown is a horrific thing to do when, in fact, this shutdown, should it happen, it only shuts down 30% of the government. 70% is already funded, including our military. When Schumer actually shut the government down, it was a 100% government shutdown affecting our troops, affecting every single crevice of government. So quite a difference, but the facts are lost upon Schumer, perhaps intentionally so, as he engages in all of this hypocrisy.
Okay, so and that is another point I tried to make earlier here on the program, talking about the fact that in this particular shutdown, 87% of the government, and this is not a done deal. We don't know that it's going to be shut down, but if it were to be shut down this particular time, we're talking about 87% of the government that's completely unaffected by this, that would go on untouched, nothing, no changes, nobody would be furloughed or stay home or anything. And so that leaves a very small sliver, which is just a few agencies that are impacted by this. And I not to diminish the importance of a shutdown, but this is a different scenario, is it not?
It is a completely different scenario, no doubt about it, for all the reasons you just noted. And also, it's a different scenario because now we're talking about border security, which has become an eminent critical issue. When you look at the caravan that came barreling toward our border, throwing rocks at Border Patrol agents, when you consider the fact that this year alone there are the upwards of 160,000 individuals being detained who are illegal immigrants with criminal records in a removal order, it's an imminent situation that we need to rectify. And this is really our last chance, unless, the next 2 years beyond 2020 or the next 4 years that the president will have, unless we Republicans take control of the House, regain control, this is our last chance, because Democrats and Nancy Pelosi, she will never put forward legislation that will fund a border wall system. It's just not going to happen. So really now is the time to dig in and to make the demand that the Republicans and 8 Democrats step up and stand alongside them and get this done, because it's not going to get done when Nancy Pelosi takes the gavel.
And by the way, for anyone who's wondering, because I mentioned Nancy Pelosi's home, she actually has a vineyard in Northern California that makes her the 4th richest Californian in Congress. And she and her husband regularly ask for special meetings with their zoning board and committee to expand their winery and to make more money with it, and to complain about different local issues that are going on in their neighborhood. They're like the most high maintenance neighbors you've ever seen, only these are not your average everyday neighborhood. I mean, there's a tennis court, there's a bocce ball court, there's a pool house, there's a separate house on the property, a racquetball court, and then the house itself adjacent to another large structure that I'm assuming is the winery portion of the whole deal. So this is a woman who is as far removed from swiping her own groceries at the grocery store in the self-check lane and pumping her own gas as she could possibly be, but she's advocating for Americans who live along the border not to have any access to safe and secure access to their own land through having a very porous southern border. And you spoke about the shutdown, and I want to, you also mentioned 2020. So, Kaylee, when we talk about strategy and talk about the way that the Democrats completely overplayed their hand with Judge Kavanaugh, who is now Justice Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, and the backlash from that, which gave the Republicans a very solid lead in the Senate, which will enable the president to appoint more conservative justices, do you see them overplaying their hand with immigration and some of these other really kitchen table issues that would make it even more possible and likely for the president to return for a second term?
Oh, absolutely. I think that they have already overplayed their hand and will continue to do so. You know, President Trump does not get enough credit for being the great negotiator who took a step towards Democrats and said, hey, wasn't in the initial plan, but I will give DACA recipients a path to legalization if in exchange you give me border wall funding, an end to the diversity lottery, and an end to chain migration. And this is a deal that 63% of Americans support in the most recent Harvard-Harris poll that came out a few days ago. So they overplayed their hand by dismissing this compromise out of hand, one the American people want, and instead marginalizing the issue. And I think that's where they really go astray, is when they marginalize a very important issue, like Nancy Pelosi saying, just mow the grass, it'll fix the border problem. Americans consistently rank immigration in the top 3 issues of importance to them. So when you marginalize that, I do think you overplay your hand instead of coming to the table, negotiating, compromising, and getting comprehensive immigration reform done and securing our border.
And this is an issue that's not going away. When we look at the numbers of illegal crossings, and even with, let's say, you know, best case scenario, the president gets the military to complete the portions of, you know, the open, wide open areas that have no fencing, no wall. Those are quickly filled in and shored up by the president using the military. That still doesn't stop the 40% of you know, people who are here illegally overstaying their visas. It doesn't stop chain migration, and it doesn't stop the outsized number of Americans who are assaulted, you know, raped, kidnapped, you know, gun offenses, you name it, that these crimes are happening to American citizens. So this is something that is going to remain an issue into the 2020 election cycle, and I don't think the Democrats are on the right side of it.
They're not, and it certainly will remain a relevant issue when you consider the fact that it's not just the border structure, which 53% of voters support, which I actually think it's higher than that, but that's what the Harvard-Harris poll shows, so majority support. It's not just that. You're right to say it's dealing with individuals within our interior. It's making sure that American lives are not forever changed because a criminal is released on the street. And it's worth just mentioning, you know, we have a compassionate immigration system in this country. We open our doors to millions and millions of immigrants who come here the legal way. We are a better country when we have others who come here and want to assimilate and become hardworking Americans. We're better for it. But we're not better for it when illegal immigrants run across the border, some of whom have very rich criminal histories, and an American citizen is injured or loses their life at the hand of that individual. It's an intolerable situation, and what the left consistently says is, oh, well, that only happens to a few dozen or a few hundred people, which isn't the case. It's actually far more. But even one American citizen who loses their life at the hands of someone who shouldn't be here should be more than enough to want to fix the problem.
You're so right. You're so right. And that is why we love having you on. You are one of our favorite guests as well, Kayleigh McEnany. Thank you for joining us and taking time out to cover this important story. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Stacey. You too.
All right. Talk to you again soon. And that was Kayleigh McEnany. My apologies for mixing her up with her colleague, Cassie Smedile, who often comes on the show as well. Both of them working for the Republican National Committee and doing a fantastic job of keeping us up to date and really on the cutting edge of news cycles. And this was a huge story today. The president sitting down with these two leaders from the Democrat side. I have to say, I think it's extraordinarily unprofessional for Nancy Pelosi to behave as if the rest of us can't learn about how she lives. And again, it's not that her being fantastically wealthy and her husband Paul and she owning vineyards and living in, you know, this Tony area of the Napa Valley wine region, that any of that is a problem or that I'm in any way jealous or covetous of the situation. I am not. I am so just, that's not how I roll. But the reason that I bring it up and point it out is because of the hypocrisy of her having this open border stance instead of simply saying, you know, this is ideologically what I believe in, but it's not something I'd ever want to live with. And sometimes we catch Democrats saying things like that. We do. It happens sometimes. But for the most part, we're seeing them act as if these two things exist in separate universes. And for Nancy Pelosi, it really does. Her time in Washington, D.C. is spent in the halls of power, influencing the way we live. Her time in California is spent on her palatial estate and helping her husband manage their vineyard and apply for other opportunities to expand their business and other things that she's able to do. So, give you a little bit more detail here. 4th richest Californian in Congress. She has a minimum net worth of $29.3 million. And her vineyard makes between it's valued between $5 million and $25 million. So yeah, no illegal immigrants over there. We'll be back with more right after this.
2018 was the busiest year ever for 8 Days of Hope. Steve Tiber. Over 6,000 volunteers descended to Southeast Houston over a 3-week period during 8 Days of Hope 14, 15, and 16, and helped over 1,000 families rebuild their homes, all in the name of Jesus. Also, Hurricane Florence hit North Carolina. We had volunteers, leaders, and equipment in New Bern, Fayetteville, and Wilmington. And then, of course, Hurricane Michael striking the panhandle of Florida. We were in Panama City Beach for 5 weeks, loving and serving families who had nowhere to turn. 2019 could even be busier as we plan to go back to some of these same communities to be a glimpse of who Jesus is by using the gifts he's given us to bless those who are looking for a glimmer of hope. Go to 8daysofhope.com, submit your email address, and we'll notify you of our plans in 2019.
American Family Association is pleased to partner with 8 Days of Hope, and you can too. Learn more at 8daysofhope.com.
Be the hands and feet of Jesus.
American Family Radio.
Samaritan's Purse.
And your family.
Together, we can bring good news and great joy to needy children.
Simply pack an Operation Christmas Child shoebox with toys, school supplies, and hygiene items. Then, drop off your shoebox gift during National Collection Week.
Visit AFR.net, click the Operation Christmas Child banner, and then get packing.
As we all know, Jesus is the reason for the season. But sadly, there are some folks who don't. Join the American Family Association and spread the word by ordering our Keep Christ in Christmas wristbands. You can purchase them in sets of 10, and if you buy more, you'll save more. Order by December 14th to receive them just in time for Christmas. You can share them with anyone. We just want to remind people that you can't have Christmas without Christ. Order yours now at afastore.net.
Foreign Dispatch.
As far as the situation here goes in Tijuana, the migrants have been pushed back to a camp about 11 miles from the border in an effort by the Mexican government to reduce the chance of any sparks of violence. The numbers, too, are down. About 2,500 in that government camp, down from a high of anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000. Tensions along the border continue to rise as migrants face unsanitary health conditions at shelters. And now making headlines, a Honduran woman who is believed to be the first member of the caravan to have a child in the U.S. after scaling a border wall with her family. That child now a U.S. citizen due to birthright citizenship. President Trump has vowed to end birthright citizenship with an executive order, though some believe the move could require a constitutional amendment. In Tijuana, Steve Harrigan, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The Republicans, at least for another 3 weeks, control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And if they want to go ahead and pass the budget without us, they can do it. But if they need our help, we don't believe in their wall. We're with the majority of the American people who think it's a ridiculous waste of money. And the president is being very irresponsible if he's threatening to shut down the U.S. government at a time when the markets are already roiling and there's all of this uncertainty out there over the wall, which we don't support. So our position is, sure, let's invest in border security, let's do immigration reform, but let's get to the business of the American people and stop the nonsense about the wall. We're for $0 in border wall funding. Now, we obviously support money for security measures at the border, as we always have, and so we're not averse to that. But we don't want to go down the road of putting, $50 million in there, and then they say, oh, we've already started the wall. It's true that the president promised that he'd build the wall. He also promised that Mexico would pay for it. So if he wants to keep one promise, he should keep the other two. Let the Mexican government pay for it. The president has said that it's a good time where, what we need is a good government shutdown. That's just tremendously irresponsible with all of the instability taking place around the world, with our markets completely in an uproar right now. And so we're urging the president and anybody who's around him to encourage him to come to the table, pass something that we can all agree to.
Right. So, in other words, something we can all agree to means something that Democrats can use to fundraise off of because it's a victory for them, as opposed to giving the president what he's asked for. And, Drudge has, one of their headlines today is that the president's approval rating is at 49%. So clearly something about this 98% negative media coverage isn't hitting the mark. Is it? No, it's not. It's not hitting the mark. And I'm laughing a little bit because you would think with 98% negative coverage that you would not be able to find 49% of Americans who would say, I think he's doing a fine job. I think he's doing a good job. Or, you wouldn't be able to find that number of Americans to be able to say that. You just wouldn't. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037, talking about anything we've discussed today on the program. We also have the First Step Act, which is, we've had guests on the program to discuss it, and Leader McConnell said today on the Senate floor, here's a quote, "At the request of the president and following improvements to the legislation that has been secured by several members, the Senate will take up the recently revised criminal justice bill." Now, if this bill is passed, this will be a huge win for President Trump and the administration, because criminal justice reform is something that you would think President Obama would have undertaken. You would think that President Obama would have said, I'm going to do this because it helps with constituents in the Black community, not all of whom are impacted by it, but obviously it's of concern. But instead, he didn't really have anything to say about this. It was not on his radar. Now, I again, presidents are going to do whatever they have on their agenda, but it doesn't look good for President Obama that right along the heels of President Trump discussing the First Step Act and kind of making the rounds with it and going all over the place with it, during that time, we've seen President Obama coming out and just, he's been making a spectacle of himself, trying to take credit for the economy, coming out and talking about and everything but the kitchen sink. And it's fine for, obviously he has rights just like any other person. He can come out, he can talk, he can whatever, but he's not, the way he's doing it doesn't look as if he's someone who's dealing from a position of strength. It's like he's playing cleanup. Oh, he's talking about criminal justice reform. Well, I'm the one who was responsible for the economy. I'm the one who's done this, and that. It's bad form. It's terrible to listen to, and it's tiresome. Now, I want to turn back to some of the testimony by James Comey. And remember, they're doing closed-door testimony with the House Judiciary Committee and House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And during this testimony, former FBI Director James Comey said he couldn't interpret what FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok meant when he sent FBI Special Counsel Lisa Page a text that said Hillary should win 100 million to 1. And so Comey said, well, I'm not in a position to interpret their text exchanges, so I can't answer that. Now, how are you the chief law enforcement, or he was, well, not chief law enforcement, that's the Attorney General. He was the head of the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations. The name itself infers that you can read other people's communications and analyze them and figure out what they meant. The name points to you being able to do that. He says, I'm not in a position to interpret their text exchanges. So on July 5th, 2016, obviously, going back over that, we don't need to. He announced the FBI wouldn't recommend criminal prosecution of Hillary. But This text that he's saying he can't interpret is from March 3rd of 2016. Comey said, and I'm quoting him, "People can disagree, people can agree, but they will at least understand that the decision was made and the recommendation was made the way you would want it to be, by people who didn't give a hoot about politics, who cared about what are the facts, what is the law, and how similar all people have been treated in the past." Now, I know the guy who was pardoned by President Trump, who spent about a year in jail, he would probably have something different to say. He would probably feel differently about what Comey just alleged. We've got the OIG report, and you've got the text messages commenting on Trump and Clinton. In the OIG's report, it talks about, in this section, we highlight examples of text messages of a political nature commenting on Trump and Clinton. We include explanations provided by Page and Strzok about their use of FBI-issued phones in general and their use of FBI-issued phones for political discussions. The sender of each text message is identified after the date. This is back in 2015 in August. Bernie Sanders is an idiot like Trump. Figure they cancel each other out. Strzok texted that. February 12th, 2016, Page says, "I'm no prude, but I'm really appalled by this. So you don't have to go looking into, in case you hadn't heard, Trump called, someone a name. The man has no dignity or class. He simply cannot be president. With a slur for Ted Cruz, Donald Trump further splits voters." And she puts a link in there to this New York Times piece. Then February 12th of 2016, same day, "Oh, he's abysmal. I keep hoping the charade will end and people will just dump him. The problem then is Rubio will likely lose to Cruz. The Republican Party is in utter shambles. When was the last competitive ticket they offered?" March 3rd, 2016, "Takes the Lord's name in vain. Trump is a loathsome human." March 3rd, Strzok texts back, OMG. He just types out the letters, OMG, Trump's an idiot. March 3rd, 2016, Page, "He's awful." Same day, Strzok, "Takes the Lord's name in vain. Hillary should win 100 million to 0. And it just goes on and on like that. Over and over again, these people have demonstrated their bias. Now, everyone has bias. It's not about them having the bias. It's that they were so careful to demonstrate and so open with it, so nonchalant. So the questioning was done by Mr. Gowdy, and he asked, in March of 2016, Strzok wrote, "Hillary should win 100 million to 0. Do you recall whether the Democrat primary was still ongoing in March of 2016? Comey says, "I'm not in a position to answer. You gave a long preamble to that about things I don't know from my own personal knowledge. I'm going to exclude that part of your preamble and just answer the question at the end. Do I know whether the Democratic primary was ongoing in March of 2016? I think so, yes." Gowdy says, "Well, let me back up, in fairness to you, and ask whether or not you've had a chance to read any of the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page." Comey says, "I've seen some of them in the open source, in the media, obviously, since I was fired as director." Gowdy says, "Did you read any of them in preparation for today?" Comey said, "No, I did not." So then Gowdy goes on to ask if it's correct that if you are correct that the Democratic primary was still open in March of 2016, and I read that as Special Agent Peter Strzok commenting that she should win the primary 100 million to 0, and I guess an alternative reading of that would be that he already had her as the nominee and she should win the general 100 million to 0. Is there another reading other than those two, winning the primary or winning the general? And Comey says, "I'm not in a position to interpret their text messages, so I can't answer that." Gowdy says, "In the course of human history, has anyone won an election 100 million to 0 to your knowledge?" And Comey says, "In the United States?" Because he's just, he's going full on, wig brain. And Gowdy says, "Anywhere." Comey says, "I don't mean to be facetious. I can't speak to Stalin's reelection or Mao Zedong reelection campaigns." And Gowdy says 100 million to 0 is a lot. And Comey says, "Sure, I'm not trying to be facetious, but I remember as a student, the vote in Soviet Russia was 99% to..." Gowdy says, "We're going to get to Russia in a little bit. We'll get to Russia in a little bit." So here's what we're hearing here. It's as if Comey thinks he's on some reality show where the object is for him to obfuscate the conversation. And instead of him doing that, well, he's not even able to do that well. He's not even able to pull it off so that it looks as if he's being genuine, when in reality, he's just there to obstruct them from getting to their final conclusion about the investigation that they're running. It's not that he's worried about being prosecuted. I seriously doubt if FBI Director or former FBI Director Comey is worried about being prosecuted. I don't think he's even concerned that this might turn out to be something that might damage him in any way. He's not concerned about any of it. The only thing he's worried about is making sure that he can damage the president further. The references to Mao Zedong and Stalin, the references to Russia, he's trying to create a mental connection for people. They've already heard it so many times in the media. Why not hear it from FBI Director James Comey? He's still on Team Clinton. Even now that he has nothing really further to gain, he's still Team Clinton 110%. So we have time for just a couple of calls if you'd like. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. When we mentioned the immigrants coming to the southern border and claiming asylum, you have to have credible fear. And so, of course, the cbp.gov actually has reporting on this, which is super important because who better to ask than the actual government officials tasked with putting this information into computers and keeping it collated and up to date. So the CBP Southwest Border and Claims of Credible Fear total apprehensions and inadmissibles. These numbers are for fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 2018. They have total apprehensions and inadmissibles, fiscal year 2017, 415,517. And for fiscal year 18, they have 521,090 individuals, an increase of over 100,000. Total claims of credible fear, apprehensions, and inadmissibles, 55,584 for fiscal year 17, 92,959 for fiscal year 2018. So these numbers are jumping up astronomically. Now, you're probably wondering, what do they ask them? Well, here are the questions. Under expedited removal provisions, an agent or officer takes the applicant's sworn statement, including asking 4 questions regarding any fear the alien may have of returning to his or her home country and the potential of being harmed. During expedited removal proceedings, detainees are questioned regarding any fear they may have of returning to their country of origin, to ensure that each detainee is afforded the ability to articulate claims of fear. Those questions are: why did you leave your home country or country of last residence? Do you have any fear or concern about being returned to your home country or being removed from the United States? Now, obviously, someone who really wants to live here is going to say yes to that question. Are they not? Would you be harmed if you returned to your home country or country of last residence? Do you have any questions, or is there anything else you'd like to add? So the Office of Field Operations also maintains numbers, and they're just as crazy high, just crazy high. And they have a list where you can go, Southwest Border Claims of Credible Fear, inadmissibles by field office, where you can check out which offices received which numbers of claims, like which offices received the most, which received the least, et cetera, et cetera. So the data is there for us to look at in between getting ready for Christmas and trying to get together with family and friends and all the other stuff we have to do, working, eating, sleeping, taking care of kids and family. We can look up this information as well. I know people aren't excited about that, but we have to be informed. All right. Good evening from the Heartland. God bless you. Be back with you tomorrow.